puts up a three. And a goal!
Getting into a new show here on the Believe Network, presented by Bet Online. I'm your host, Russ Heltman. He's my co-host. Joined across the other side of the screen from me, Neil Meyer of Cincinnati Rivals site, frontofficenews.com. And I'm Russ Heltman of Cincinnati Bearcats on SI. It's going to be a jam-packed show today. We got the Crosstown Shootout preview 2024 ready to go to open the first half of the show, and then the latest transfer portal update. No commitments yet as of this recording for Cincinnati, but some visits locked in and some clear positions of need identified, and then one big name that said he's going to return in the ensuing days between our last episode and this episode. Gavin Gerhardt coming back to the fold and going to anchor that offensive line in 2025 at the center position, coming off of arguably his best season in Clifton. Gavin had a very strong 2024 campaign, and that's a big time retention for Nick Cardwell's offensive line and Scott Satterfield above him. Before all that, though, we got to tell you about Bet Online. They are the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, Bet Online provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen, with the largest selection of odds on everything from football, the NBA and college basketball, NHL to UFC. Head to Bet Online today. And don't forget to use that promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV for your welcome bonus on that first deposit. Bet Online. The game starts here, and we will start this show, Neil, with a quick break, and we'll get into the preview of the Crosstown Shootout, the 92nd Crosstown Shootout, after these messages on Bearcat Blitz. Neil, Cincinnati entering this game on a 5-game losing streak in the all-time series against Xavier. They have this one at home at Fifth Third Arena in what is announced on Wednesday as a sold-out crowd in store on Saturday. This is the biggest game in the city each and every year. It's arguably the biggest game of the year for the Bearcats in terms of what it can propel them to do moving forward, although obviously all of their goals are still ahead of them no matter what happens in this game, win or lose. But Neil, given that losing streak, given they've lost 8 of 10 in this series, Wes Miller's never beat this team, and they only have one player on the roster that has etched a win against Xavier, and Simas Lukosius doing that in his time with the Butler Bulldogs. Just for the confidence, the overall trajectory of the season, it's not a must-win game by any means. We're not going to say that, but things would feel like they have a lot of lighter fluid dropped on them if they can get a victory in this game and justify being currently pulled up right now, I believe, 82.9 or 82% favorites, 81.8% favorites, I'll be exact, on ESPN's matchup predictor. Predicted they win 81.8% of the time as the 18th ranked team in KenPom up against the 61st ranked team in KenPom, albeit the best team on KenPom's rankings that Cincinnati's played this year. A little whistle. Kind of all you got to say about this matchup.
Yeah, no, most certainly, Russ, and you can feel the energy around the city. Obviously, for people who have been following along, I feel like we've been talking about this game every day for this week. Heading into this matchup, it's going to be an electric environment on Saturday at Fifth Third Arena. On top of it, Russ, you can't talk about this matchup. The fire all-black jerseys Cincinnati will be wearing.
Those were sweet. Fire. The Black Cat. I love how they call them the Black Cats.
And that's a huge shout out to our boy Ethan Harrison for the job he did on that.
Awesome video by Ethan.
On that video. So shout out that Russ, this is the game everyone's waiting for. Everybody knows what this game means in the city of Cincinnati. Cincinnati versus Xavier. It's going to be an interesting matchup. It's going to be a different matchup from what years past. You can feel the buildup of this one already. Obviously, Cincinnati's had a week to prepare. Xavier had a little tune-up game versus Morgan State on Tuesday night where they just completely manhandled Morgan State. But on top of it, Russ, the energy in this city, it's brewing, and it's brewing quick. I mean, you see Cincinnati's opening the gates a little earlier on Saturday, get them fans in the stands. It's going to be electric. We know the kind of environment that's there, but you heard the comments from Wes Miller earlier in the week that he knows the importance of this rivalry. These guys feel the energy. Dylan Mitchell came out and said he's heard all about this rivalry since taking his visit to Cincinnati back in the spring. So that says a lot about it. These guys are embracing it, and we got to catch the open practice a little bit the other day, Russ, and they're locked in. The intensity is, Wes Miller said he's been on level 10, quote unquote, level 10 since the Georgia Tech game. Russ, it's safe to say that they are on maybe 11 or 12 right now, level 11 or 12. So the energy's brewing. It's going to be a fun time at Fifth Third Arena on Saturday.
Yeah, I thought they looked dialed in on Tuesday. They added some new actions on Tuesday as well. Obviously, we're not going to dive into the details of those, but they're working hard, Neil. They're working hard on just figuring out the best way to throw something new at Xavier. We'll see if they even break out those actions in this game from what I saw on Tuesday, but just dialed in practice. It really was. And I think this is a program that understands the kind of opportunity they have here. The rest opportunity they've been afforded, where you want to, if you're Wes Miller and this coaching staff, you want to see this team play a game on this past Wednesday or this past Tuesday night. Unfortunately, just unable to make it happen due to the rules surrounding finals week for the players and just the school in general. But even without that game, I think they've handled it correctly. And just even during practice, like they weren't really necessarily like dialing into what they're going to do for Xavier. It was more so getting through what they need to do as a team to get ready for the plan that will eventually go into Xavier. So I think they've handled it the right way in terms of the build up for this game, Neil, and not making it too big, too early in the week, which we didn't see any of that at practice on Tuesday. I love what I saw from the program in that sense. And I love being able to get out to practice. It's a lot of fun seeing them work and just seeing what kind of stuff they like to work on each and every practice. I'm always curious as to how they're going to tweak what I see in the latest practice versus what I've seen in the week before or 2 weeks before. So love that they open those up for the media, and love getting the opportunity to check those out. In terms of practice though, Neil, there won't be much to practice. There won't be much time left to practice here soon, as we are fast approaching this game. And offensively, starting on that end of the floor for Cincinnati, seems to me, Neil, like around 9 to 12 3-point makes in this game is going to be what the doctors ordered for getting a victory at home against Xavier. They're a high-paced team in Xavier. They're the best offensive team in Xavier that Cincinnati's faced this season, and honestly, probably the best defensive team that they've faced this season when you think about them allowing just 44.9% from two-point range. That's 48th nationally. They're forcing 8.5 steals per game so far this season. That's 75th nationally. Neil, they're going to be right on Cincinnati all throughout this game. They're going to be attaching them in a man-to-man defense sense. Dalen Swain, I would imagine, is going to be all over Seamus Lukosius for much of this game, kind of switching between him and Dan Skillings, depending on who's doing the most damage. Dalen Swain, one of the most efficient offensive players for Xavier, if not their most efficient offensive player, and their best defensive player overall when you think about him shooting 62.5% from the floor and posting 1.9 steals per game. Breaking down Swain defensively, Neil, and swinging that basketball around for open shooters, finding those open actions on the outside and figuring out a way to drop in 9 to 12 triples is going to be, I think, huge in this one, given how strong that interior defense is for Xavier and how strong they can set things up in terms of ball screen defense and on man-to-man defense with Swain funneling into the rim protecting force that is Zach Freemantle, and a guy who is very strong defensively down low.
Yeah, no, most certainly. Everybody knows what you're getting into with Zach Freemantle. Obviously, he's been around since 2012, I feel like, but realistically, 2018 for those who follow it. But
he's like Perry Ellis, the guy from was it Kansas?
Kansas, yeah, where he played like 8 years, it felt like. But Zach Freemantle is a hell of a player, Russ. Everybody knows that. I mean, look at what he's doing right now. He finished with 27-10 and some crazy stats versus Morgan State, and what he's doing right now, coming off 2 major foot injuries. And he's the glue piece for this Xavier thing. If he can stay healthy, Xavier could potentially make a deep run in this. But he's going to be a key impact player for Xavier on Friday or on Saturday. Everybody knows that. But this is the Xavier team Russ said, it's going to be a very thin rotation for Xavier for those following extensively. Obviously, you mentioned Dalen Swain. This is a team without Desmond Claude. They lost him to USC this offseason in the transfer portal, but they went and attacked the transfer portal hard this offseason. And Russ, let's be honest, you're looking down at this roster for Xavier. There's only 3 contributors, or 4, quote unquote, 4 contributors to Xavier that have played in this rivalry game before. Zach Freemantle been around for 6 years. He's obviously experienced this. Jerome Hunter being around for 6 years. But the only other 2 guys who experienced this matchup on this Xavier roster that played decent minutes, Davion McKnight, who had probably his best game of the season versus the Bearcats last season, and Dalen Swain, who have only played in this matchup 1 time. Xavier has nobody else outside of those 4 guys who have really played in this environment and this kind of matchup. So some of these guys are still trying to probably figure out the pieces of what this rivalry might mean come Saturday. But on top of it, Zach Freemantle, he's a load in the paint. Everybody knows that. But for the keys for Cincinnati offensively, this is where I think if Aziz Bandaogo, Arrington Page can come and disrupt Dylan Mitchell as well, Cincinnati can disrupt Zach Freemantle like they were able to do in years past. It could be a difference maker.
Like get aggressive and bring the actions to Freemantle, maybe get into some foul trouble a little bit.
Yeah, if Xavier gets into some foul trouble early, Russ, that's going to be the difference maker here, because you look down in the paint, they're going to rely heavily on guys like Marcus Foster, Jerome Hunter, Zach Freemantle. They're going to rely heavy on there. But if you get Zach Freemantle into foul trouble early in this one, things could go differently, because they're only playing 8 to 9 guys. They're playing 9 guys before Trey Green takes the leave of absence, who won't be playing on Saturday. So that's a huge blow to Xavier's front court as well, because this was a guy averaging 10 to 12 minutes off the bench and was their backup point guard. Now Xavier's going to be without that. So if anybody gets into foul trouble, that lineup's going to be pretty thin for Xavier if they're playing that 8 to 9 man rotation. But Russ, it's going to be fun. Dylan Mitchell versus Zach Freemantle. I'm excited to see that matchup. I'm excited.
Yeah, and Xavier have been very strong in terms of not allowing free throws so far this season, Neil, but they have been a little foul happy. 18.8 fouls per game this season. That's 280th nationally, although they've allowed just 17.6 free throw attempts. 15.9 personal fouls per game. I was looking at the opponents. 15.9 personal fouls per game for Xavier. That's 260th nationally. And then their opponents are shooting 17.6 free throws per game. Much better in that sense. 128th nationally.
What
were you going to say, Neil?
Expect to see probably 20 foul calls on Xavier or Cincinnati this weekend. Obviously, due to the rivalry, everyone knows this game's going to get a little physical. So expect those foul numbers to kind of maybe climb a little bit, depending on which way the refs kind of want to call this game, whether it's going to be a strict game or they're going to let things play. It is rivalry week, so I mean, you never know in this kind of thing, but it's going to be interesting.
The aggressor. I think it's a good idea to be the aggressor in this game for Cincinnati in terms of the physicality. Like make your upped physicality set the tone for how they're going to call the game, because also being at home, Neil, you'd think if you bring the physicality at a high level and you're the home team, and you're going to get the better whistle.
You got 13,500 right behind you. And Dylan Mitchell has said that crowd will win you games at Fifth Third this season. And Russ, you and I talked about it multiple times. This could be the game where Cincinnati's crowd wins them this game. Obviously, everybody knows Crosstown Shootout. The crowd brings it usually. But this is going to be a game where I expect fans to be in their seats at 12 o'clock when the doors open, get a couple of drinks, whatever it might be. They're having a happy hour and a half is what they're calling it. But I expect fans to be in their seat by 12 o'clock come Saturday. Get your cheese conies, whatever it might be. Have a good time. Be loud. It's going to be an environment, Russ. I know last year they did the red out. This year they're doing the blackout. So it's going to be an environment. Everybody knows the physicality, what goes on in this game. But it's going to depend on if Cincinnati comes out aggressive and plays and sets the tone early. You know those fans are going to be behind you, Russ. We see them get loud for the dunks. We see them get loud for the made three-pointers, but these fans get the loudest when they play aggressive, they play freely, they're hitting the floor, they're physical. If that happens on Saturday for Cincinnati and they play aggressive, you're going to have 13,500 behind you, supporting you too, in what hopes could be a Bearcat victory on Saturday.
And you got to start faster offensively. You got to wake up. You got to be awake. You got to have those eyes fully wide, ready to go from tip off. This isn't Morehead State. This isn't Howard. This isn't Alabama State. This is Xavier. This is why you come to Cincinnati, for this game right here. So you got to be ready to roll if you're every one of those starting lineup members on Saturday afternoon. We'll see if Dan Skillings is a part of that starting lineup on Saturday afternoon. I would imagine he will be, as we switch to the defensive side of things here and look at the high-low combination, Neil, of Ryan Conwell at the top of the key and Zach Freemantle down low. If they can find a way to limit those two players to 12 points or less each, then they should win this game by double digits. If they keep them close to their season averages, then this is going to go right down to the wire, in my opinion, when you think about Freemantle averaging 16.8 points per game and 7.8 rebounds, and Conwell, who UC knows from Indiana State fame last year, Indiana State.
And USF back in the AAC.
Yeah, good call, Neil. He's played Cincinnati quite a few times and had success against them. 16.4 points per game, 2.5 assists so far this season for Conwell. And they're kind of led by Davion McKnight. He's the puppeteer. He's pulling all the strings as the puppet master at the top of the key alongside Conwell. 11.1 points per game and a team high 4.3 assists. They're super efficient, Neil. Super efficient with those two leading scorers. 27 PER player efficiency rating for Freemantle. That's 6th best in the Big East so far this season. And Conwell's rocking a 19.6 PER. That's 17th best in the Big East. It's going to be a lighter rotation here. I would imagine Conwell and Freemantle play 35, maybe 38 minutes in this game. Like, it's going to be a full nearly 40-minute diet of Conwell, Freemantle, and probably McKnight as well. And that sense, when you think about Trey Green not being available as the backup.
This is a game too, Russ, where everybody knows every year this game has that one or two guys off the deep bench from either team that comes off and just goes nuclear. For Xavier, the player to watch that I'm going to name is Dante Maddox. I think if those two guys get into foul trouble with McKnight and Conwell, look for Dante Maddox to step in, the Toledo transfer. That could be the guy that could be the difference maker for Xavier, especially there in the front court if something happens and they get into foul trouble or shots aren't falling. Pure sharpshooter out of Toledo. I think that could be a guy to watch for Xavier. But Russ, on this aspect for Cincinnati, Jizzle James embraced this opportunity last year, finishing with 19 points in his first Crosstown Shootout. I think this is a game where Jizzle James takes over and goes for 20.
I like it. It's definitely possible. And he's a big game player. And he's a guy that's going to be tasked with not only putting up close to 15, 20 points and 7+ assists you'd like to see out of him on one end, but also that point of attack defender on the other end, Neil, and how he pairs. I would imagine it'll be interesting. Like, how much do they have Dylan Mitchell flash between? I'd imagine he'd be on Swain for a lot of the game and not as much on Freemantle, but who knows? They might double Freemantle a decent amount with Bandago or Page along with Mitchell in that aspect. But they just got to deny him the ball. You got to deny Zach Freemantle the ball as much as possible. I think you're willing to get this into a shooting contest on the outside. You're willing to let the Xavier team shoot those 3-point shots.
Unless it's Ryan Conwell. Conwell, you do not let him shoot.
Right. Yeah, you don't want to give them open threes, but despite them shooting 44.1% from the floor, they're only taking about 22.7 3-point attempts per game. So that efficiency is going to go down if you're forcing them to take a lot of outside shots more than they're used to. And I just think, like, we've seen how UC can get crushed in this game before. It's foul trouble, and it's with big fellas like Freemantle doing whatever they want in the interior, especially on the road where it should be more difficult to hit those outside shots and a lot easier to hit those inside shots. Ball denial for Zach Freemantle, ball denial as much as possible in the interior, and you're willing to die by the outside shot against some of those lesser shooters that you're going to have to be playing with Trey Green not available here. But as you mentioned, Neil, if you have to sell out against Ryan Conwell for that outside shot, you go do it. But I think you're willing to give up some open looks if it has to happen on the outside, as opposed to consistent entry, play after play after play to a guy like Zach Freemantle. That's the biggest key to me. And just as Dylan Mitchell said, when Chad asked him about the 7 points or less record for Xavier in this series this century. They've been dominant in games decided by 7 points or fewer. And he asked Dylan Mitchell about that. And Mitchell just said, we got to stay together. We got to fight through the highs and lows. We got to stay together through this entire game. That's kind of paraphrasing what he said. But all in all, Neil, I think they will stay together enough to get the win. I think it's going to be a laughable spread in terms of what the computers are going to spit out for this. I would imagine it's going to be like 8.5 to 10 points in favor of UC. I would be shocked if they won this game by double digits, just given the history of this outing. But I do think they win. 81-77 victory for the Bearcats. What do you got on Saturday afternoon?
I'm going to go 84-76 in favor of the Bearcats. And
okay,
everybody obviously knows the rivalry in this game. There's going to be points scored. Everybody knows that. That's usually how it is. But you can't count anything out. Cincinnati was down by 20 2 years ago before David DeJulius tied the game up with 11 seconds on an acrobatic shot. Anything can happen in this game. But I'm going 82-74 in favor of the Bearcats.
Taking a quick break, getting to the transfer portal after this. Wrapping up the latest Bearcat Blitz presented by Bet Online. I'm your host, Russ Heltman. He's my co-host, Neil Mile. I try to call him Neil Mile. Neil Meyer. That's the right way to say it. As we get into the right way forward for Gavin Gerhardt, he is coming back for his final season of eligibility, Neil. That's probably the biggest news out of the transfer portal we've had so far between our latest show right now and our last show earlier in the week. Massive development for Cincinnati to get Gavin Gerhardt back, anchoring an offensive line that's A, going to look a lot different, and B, going to probably be a lot younger going into 2025 once that dust completely settles from the transfer portal.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a big thing for Cincinnati to get Gavin Gerhardt back, Russ. Obviously, that's huge news up front. You get your starting center back. You might be getting one or two more guys back up front, and you don't know 100% yet, but there's still some things trending in the right direction for Cincinnati heading into year 3 under Scott Satterfield. Transfer portal, everyone kind of knows and sees what they're getting into. What are they targeting? Wide receivers, offensive linemen, defensive linemen, and cornerbacks. Those are your 4 kind of groups that everybody knows the targets are. And as you've seen it, offensive lineman, defensive edge. You guys have seen those throughout the social media posts. But transfer portal's here, Russ. It's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next few weeks for sure.
And kind of zooming out from Gavin Gerhardt and just into the profile of Cincinnati so far, Neil, they have, I think, been, I use this term in one of our group chats, very self-aware with their transfer portal so far in the first 4 days. They're identifying a lot of potential breakout, highly athletic players at the group of 5 at FCS level, offering them and getting into that kind of, we can be the best bell of the ball among the mid-tier power conference options that you have as one of these players. We can give you ideal playing time. We can give you ideal history in terms of the program and the aesthetic and the hierarchy that you're going to. And we're going to be honest with you. We have pelts on the wall of honesty as well. When you think about a guy like Jake Golday coming over from the FCS level and performing very well. A guy like Antoine Peak Jr., who was a walk-on, got the opportunity, took it this past season, was the highest ranked defensive player on the entire roster, led the team in forced fumbles, and made a bunch of impact plays. They have some of these pellets on the wall now, Neil, to show these players at this level that they're mining from, that we're not just a thrown together staff that's in year 1 or year 2 now. We may not have the winning records to show that the success and that things are getting better, but we do have the individual stories and the individual kind of stat lines to show that if you individually come and make this commitment here, you can make an impact in that sense, while also, as we all wrote together, can impact winning ultimately down the line. It seems like they have fully found the right kind of mix of transfer portal target to attack.
Yeah, no, most certainly. And I mean, Russ, too, when you look at the transfer portal and the job Cincinnati did last year in the transfer portal, it's also worth noting that they took the same approach that they are this year than what they did last year. They're keeping that same approach. Obviously,
Right.
Everybody knows how the transfer portal goes. But, I mean, Russ, just think about it last year. Cincinnati goes out and adds Micah Coleman in the portal, George Gums at one point in the transfer portal to pair alongside Dante Corleone. Think about that front before George Gums flipped to Florida. Think about that front. If George Gums would have stayed there, Micah Coleman stays healthy with Dante Corleone, that's a top 5 defensive line in the Big 12. So on top of it, they taking the same approach, but yet they're identifying guys where they know what they're getting into in the transfer portal. I mean, Russ, another good look at it is Rayon Strader out of Miami. That is a great target for them, being right up the road, drawing high Power 5, Power 4 offers. But they want to get those smaller guys because they know if they're going after these Power 4 transfers and whatnot in the portal, things might get a little more expensive come the money aspect in terms of NIL.
Right.
So they're wanting
and to note that money aspect, Neil, great website over at nil-ncaa.com, kind of looking at projections for the 2024 total NIL package that was available to Cincinnati Athletics, third lowest in the Big 12. It's just the bottom line. That's what they're working with. When you think about a projected NIL total sitting at $3,932,000 total split between football and basketball. $3,984,845 total split between basketball and football. UCF and Houston, the only teams lower in the Big 12. It's just what you got to work with. You can't make that 3 turn into a 30 just by in terms of the Wicked Witches flick of the wands, as for a movie that's in the zeitgeist right now. You're not having Elphaba just turn that thing into a 30 million out of nowhere. It's the numbers are the numbers, and they are addressing, I think, the issues as efficiently as you can with that number I just mentioned.
Yeah, no, most certainly. And two, you mentioned the number. Obviously, things are going to be differently now, too, in terms of things for us, too, with the roster spots going up to 105 for the football aspect. That changes everything in terms of the football, the transfer portal, NIL, and whatnot. So it's going to be interesting to see, but visits are happening. They're reaching out. Visits are happening as of early as yesterday. And it's going to be a fun next 3 weeks for us. Obviously, a lot of good stuff to come, but visits are happening. Cincinnati staff's going to be working. I would expect maybe early next week to see things kind of start trending and pick upward moving, but it's going to be a whirlwind in the next few weeks for us, to say the least.
Yeah, I would honestly be a little surprised if we are not talking about a commitment or two, possibly, by the time we get to Monday afternoon's recording. But you never know what happens. Things can move slowly. We'll see how they progress in the transfer portal over the next few days. Some visitors coming to town, and we'll see if anything comes out of that. For Neil Meyer, I'm Russ Eltman. This has been Bearcat Blitz on the Believe Network, presented by Bet Online.
This is the second. 15 seconds left. Shot clock off. 4-point game. DeJulius puts up a 3.